You opened your refrigerator this morning without thinking twice. Inside, dozens of choices. Foods shipped from other continents, meat raised specifically to be eaten, sugar, salt, and fat combined in ratios engineered to make you want more. You picked something, ate it, and moved on with your day. For nearly your entire evolutionary history, that moment would have been impossible. So what did your ancestors actually eat? Before supermarkets, before farming, before any of the food systems you take for granted? The answer is stranger, more brutal, and more surprising than the popular image of cavemen gnawing on mammoth legs. Let's start with the myth. You have probably seen the cartoon version. A caveman, club in hand, dragging a hunted animal back to a fire. Meat, and only meat, was supposedly the foundation of the ancient human diet. This image has shaped entire modern eating trends, built around the idea that your ancestors were primarily hunters living off animal protein. The archaeological record tells a different story. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham, who has spent decades studying the diets of early humans, argues that meat was important, but it was never the majority of what your ancestors actually consumed. His research suggests that for most early human populations, plant foods made up the bulk of daily caloric intake. Roots, tubers, nuts, seeds, wild fruits when available. Meat was prized, celebrated, fought over, but it was not guaranteed. Hunting is unreliable. You can spend an entire day tracking an animal and come back with nothing. Plants do not run away. This single fact reshapes everything you thought you knew about ancient eating. Consider the Jakungsan people of the Kalahari Desert, one of the most extensively studied modern hunter-gatherer populations, whose traditional way of life offers researchers a living window into ancient subsistence patterns. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent years documenting their diet in the 1960s. What he found surprised the scientific community at the time. Roughly 60 to 80% of their caloric intake came from plant foods, not meat. The mongongo nut, in particular, was a dietary staple, providing more calories and protein per unit of effort than hunting large game. Meat was not the main course. It was the celebration. This pattern likely extended far back into deep prehistory. Your ancestors were not constantly chasing down woolly mammoths for dinner. Far more often, they were digging, foraging, cracking open nuts, and gathering whatever the landscape offered that day. But here is where the story becomes genuinely strange. What your ancestors ate was not a stable, predictable diet at all. It shifted dramatically based on geography, climate, and season. A population living near a coastline ate enormous quantities of shellfish and fish. A population in a forest ate insects, roots, and forest fruit. A population on an open savanna relied more heavily on tubers and occasional meat from scavenged or hunted animals. There was no single ancient human diet. There were thousands of them, each shaped entirely by location. This is something modern diet culture conveniently forgets. When people today claim to be eating like a caveman, they are usually imagining one narrow version of prehistoric eating, often based on temperate grassland environments, while ignoring the staggering diversity of what early humans actually consumed across different ecosystems. Now for the detail that tends to genuinely disturb people. Insects were a significant, reliable source of protein for early humans, and likely still are for many populations practicing traditional foraging today. Termites, grubs, beetle larvae, and ants provided dense nutrition that was far easier to acquire than hunting large mammals. Anthropologist Julie Lesnick has spent her career studying the role of insects in human evolution. Her research suggests that termites in particular may have played an outsized role in early hominin diets, partly because they were abundant, predictable, and available year-round, unlike seasonal fruits or unreliable game. You may recoil at the idea. Your ancestors likely did not. To them, a mound of termites represented a guaranteed meal, while a herd of antelope represented a gamble. Then, there is the question of cooking, which changes this entire story in a way most people never consider. Wrangham's most influential argument, detailed in his research on the origins of cooking, is that the controlled use of fire to prepare food may have been one of the most significant evolutionary turning points in human history. Cooked food is dramatically easier to digest than raw food. It requires less energy from the digestive system, which means more energy becomes available for other biological processes, including, Wrangham argues, The growth of the human brain. Raw plant matter, particularly tough roots and fibrous tubers, is difficult for the human gut to break down efficiently. Cooking softens cell walls, breaks down complex starches, and makes calories more accessible. Some researchers argue that without the discovery of cooking, the dramatic expansion of human brain size over the last 2 million years may not have been metabolically possible at all. Your ancestors were not simply eating to survive. The way they prepared food may have quite literally built the brain you are using to process this sentence right now. This raises an uncomfortable question. If meat was not the foundation, and cooked plants and insects played such a massive role, why does the caveman-as-carnivore myth persist so strongly in modern culture? Part of the answer lies in what archaeologists can actually find. Bones preserve. Plant matter, for the most part, does not. A femur buried in sediment for 50,000 years can survive remarkably intact. A wild yam, a handful of berries, a fistful of termites leaves almost no archaeological trace at all. This creates what researchers call preservation bias. Archaeologists found abundant evidence of meat consumption simply because meat-related evidence survives, while evidence of plant-based and insect-based eating largely vanished from the fossil record. For decades, this skewed scientific understanding toward an exaggerated emphasis on hunting and meat. Newer techniques are correcting this. Researchers can now analyze dental calculus, the hardened plaque on ancient teeth, to identify microscopic plant residues, starch granules, and even traces of cooked food. This emerging field has completely reshaped scientific understanding of ancient diets within the last 2 decades. What these newer methods reveal is consistent across multiple ancient human populations. Diets were overwhelmingly varied, opportunistic, and dominated by whatever was locally and seasonally available rather than centered exclusively around hunted meat. There is something almost poetic in this revision of the historical record. The popular image of the lone caveman hunter, dramatic and masculine and meat-obsessed, has shaped countless modern narratives about what is supposedly natural for human beings to eat. But the actual evidence suggests something far less dramatic and far more resourceful. Your ancestors were dietary generalists, flexible, adaptive, willing to eat almost anything available, cooked when possible, in whatever combination the local environment offered. This flexibility may be one of the most underrated reasons your species survived at all. Environments that would have devastated more specialized species barely slowed down early humans, precisely because they were not locked into one narrow way of eating. When the megafauna disappeared in a region, your ancestors shifted toward plants and smaller game. When a drought destroyed plant life, they shifted toward whatever animal protein remained. You inherited that flexibility. Your digestive system, unlike that of a strict carnivore or strict herbivore, is built to process an enormous range of foods. That is not an accident. It is the direct biological legacy of ancestors who survived specifically because they refused to specialize. So the next time you open your refrigerator, scanning dozens of effortless choices, understand what you are actually doing. You are performing a deeply ancient behavior, just with significantly less risk attached. Your ancestors scanned a landscape the same way you scan a shelf, calculating effort against reward, gambling on availability, adapting constantly to whatever the environment provided that day. The mammoth-hunting caveman was never the whole story. The real story is messier, more varied, and in many ways, more impressive. Early humans were not defined by what they hunted. They were defined by their refusal to depend on any single source of food at all. That refusal to specialize did not just keep your ancestors alive, it may have built the very brain that allowed you to ask the question in the first place.